Oh, well, that was interesting. It decided to start on its own. He made it halfway to his workshop, cursing the black velvet on the way up the steps every time he stepped on his own hem, before it suddenly occurred to him that he didn't actually need to wear the robes if he didn't want to. He detoured back to his chamber, surprising Garabeetle in the process of beating the bed curtains. Too late, he remembered that he complained about the dust and asked the valet to do something about it. Now the room was the site of a highly localized sandstorm. Garabeetle froze, looking worried. Then again, Garabeetle always looked worried, which, as he thought about it, was a perfectly reasonable state of being for the lad. Lad? Since when had he seen the goblin as a lad? Maybe because at this point he had more clear memories of specific goblin faces than he did of humans. Do I have anything in the wardrobe that is not floor length? Gav asked, restraining a sneeze. Mumbled Garabeetle. He couldn't continue like this. Garabeetle, he said, as gently as he could manage. I promise, I am not angry at you, but I do need you to articulate just a tiny bit more. In your mourner, Garabeetle said, staring intently at his feet. Better, Gav said, encouragingly. Try tilting your head up just a bit. The young goblin raised his head, trembling. At least he was looking at Gav's feet instead of his own. I don't know, my lord. Oh. Yes, he supposed he ought to know better than his new valet what clothes he owned. But surely the constant explosions should not serve as an excuse for not being able to keep track of what had and had not survived. Whether or not the perfectly reasonable explanation had occurred to Garabeetle, the lad, at least, had already moved towards the wardrobe. Gav attempted to stand with dignity as he waited, but the sneeze that had been trying to escape since he walked in the door finally exploded. Gav sniffed with much decorum as he could muster. Would is do? Garabeetle said to Gav's feet, pulling out a handful of outfits. Oh, of course, would this do? The first appeared to be some kind of surcoat. It would probably only have reached his knees, meeting the criteria he had set, but it was in no other way acceptable. There were no sleeves, but a lining that made him think that it was intended to be worn without any kind of shirt beneath it. The collar would rise behind his head above his ears, and the black fabric was embroidered entirely from hem to collar in twisting red and gold flames. He had never seen such an eyesore. No, that certainly would not do. The second reminded him of a pirate with enormously full sleeves and incredibly tight pants, all of some kind of shiny material. He thought about the strain on his belt. He didn't know whether he had once fit into those pants, or if they had been ordered to fit in a fit of optimism, but he strongly doubted that they would come anywhere close to fastening at this point. No. The next, though, were a simple tunic and trews, in an unremarkable wool, reasonably soft, but not luxuriously so. The tunic was in its natural shade of reasonably clean sheep, and the trews were dyed brown. It was about as unlike a dark wizard as one could get. Eminently practical as well. A good outfit for a day of doing good. Yes, perfect. He rather reveled in Garabeetle's surprise. The heavy velvet went into a pile on the bed. No, he was being good today. He hung it up properly, gloating to himself as Garabeetle's eyes popped. The shirt must have been on the older side and felt a bit more snug than probably intended, but the trews had a simple drawstring that fit comfortably about his waist. He glanced at the mirror hanging on the wall. Now that made quite a difference. Without the unrelieved black, the goatee looked less sinister and more like that of a merchant. Well groomed, but hardly remarkable. He still wasn't fair enough to blend into this part of the world, his traitorously useless memory informed him. Where had Tyrwin's ancestors come from, he wondered. There was a story there that he told himself he didn't care about. But he no longer looked like he ate babies for breakfast. He wondered whether Orla would be horrified or delighted if he asked her to cook a baby, and decided that he'd rather not know. Much better, he proclaimed. Mumble, mumble, specimens, mumble usual, Gairbeetle asked Gav's knees. Specimens? Whatever he had asked for, Gav doubted that he wanted it now. But if that was what was normal? Yes, the usual, he assured Gairbeetle, hoping the usual wasn't human eyeballs or something. He couldn't really picture Gairbeetle managing to procure eyeballs from anything, though, so he was probably safe. He ducked out the door before any more interpretation could be called for. That was a nice little bit. I'm going to pause. I'm going to keep going. Hopefully this is the right choice. He extended his wandering to the lower levels. Near the kitchen he found a very narrow closet of nothing but creepy portraits. A wide variety of dress and styles and skin colors, clearly from across multiple decades or possibly centuries, and surely drawn from multiple countries. A child clutching a lute and staring straight at the viewer with dead eyes. Another one completely surrounded by dogs, possibly hundreds of them. Two identical women in diaphanous gowns stroking each other in a way that hardly seemed sisterly. Multiple gray-bearded wizard types with different shaped eyes and textures of hair, who all seemed to dress in what would be considered a highly original style, and yet seemed weirdly similar across the years. None of them looked remotely like him. He wondered who had been the previous occupant of this castle. He wondered what he had done to them. He had a sudden flash of flames and acid and screaming, and a vicious satisfaction that the fool had fallen for it. And then it was gone again, without him even managing to figure out what the plan had been or who had fallen for it. It was a bit of a relief when the captain of the guard wanted a word with him. Gav could recognize the goblin mostly by the broken red feather, since he had never seen the creature's face. Right now, he had Gairbeetle wearing mud-caked trews held in front of him. The captain's claws clasped the youngster's shoulders encouragingly. Gav was not particularly interested in having another labored conversation with Gairbeetle, especially when the valet now smelled suspiciously of shit. He hoped it was mud on the trews, at least. But he was trying to turn over a new leaf here, and that included playing the magnanimous lord of the castle, even to subjects who might be caked in shit. And he needed to start learning who he was. "Remind me of your name again," he asked the captain of the guard. The captain of the guard sucked in a breath, straightened, puffing out his chest. "Throx and Armurga Bertha Beetle." Oh dear. "Throck?" he said hopefully. The helmet nodded encouragingly, giving him less confidence that the helmet would stay on longer than a second or two in actual combat. But giving lessons on chin straps was more than he had energy for today. "All right, Throck, what is it you want to tell me?" "This, my sister's son, Gairbeetle," Throck said proudly. "Find what Lord asked for." Oh, damn, the promised specimens. But the valet looked up at him with shining eyes, so proud to be of service. He didn't want to crush the young goblin. "It seems your, sister's son is very talented," Gav temporized. "You must be very proud. What can you tell me about these, Gairbeetle?" "Mumble, mumble, specimens, mumble, sewer," Gairbeetle whispered to his toe claws. Fumes wafted off of him. Not mud, then. Oh, the specimens. And sewer. That was evocative, and yet still entirely unhelpful. He supposed he would just have to look for himself. If they smelled anything like their collector, he'd probably want to do it outside rather than in his windowless workshop. Maybe the battlements, but not now. Not until later in the day, when he could take a bath immediately after and not feel ridiculous doing so. He hesitantly held out one hand, and the young goblin produced a drawstring sack that turned out to be surprisingly heavy. The contents shifted as he grabbed it, not quite solid inside, better and better. You might want to, clean yourself up a bit, he suggested. Throck only then appeared to notice the state of his younger relative. He clouted the lad on the head. Into the moat! Gav thought of the temperature outside and shivered. Gaerbeetle shivered as well. Are there any bathtubs? Throck scratched under his helmet, and the entire thing threatened to pop off. Bathtub? No bathtub. I have a bathtub, Gav protested, not thinking. Gaerbeetle's eyes widened, and Throck sucked in a breath. Gav sighed. Gaerbeetle, you can use my bathtub. Just clean it up when you're done, all right? Gaerbeetle stammered something that he assumed to be thanks, as it was completely incoherent in its sincerity. Gav already regretted the magnanimity. There's a different way to say that word. I do not have it correct. We're just going to move on. Of the gesture, the generosity of the gesture. Circo appeared suddenly at his elbow. He wondered if perhaps the steward had his own magic spells. An emissary from the king has arrived, he said. Can we leave him in the throne room? Gav asked hopefully. For how long, my lord? Would indefinitely be a possibility? Circo paused. Shall we convert the throne room to an oblette? Tempting, although then he wasn't sure where to meet the mayor next time. Something's tickling me. I think it's my own hair. Mayor. Not an insurmountable problem, though. Can we do that? Circo started to look a little panicked. Right now, my lord? Gav winced. Avoiding his problems counted as not good. I suppose not. The only thing that made it bearable was handing the bag back to the steward, who accepted it automatically before thinking. Handing the bag. The bag wriggled in satisfaction. And we'll stop there.